So do you think that this whole idea of getting one solid monophasic sleep cycle of just that whole 8 hours is one of the biggest myths that we've been sold across like the past century of sleep?
Well, it's actually the title on the front of my book, which scared me a bit because, you're sort of making a big old statement here because you ask anybody, how many hours they try and get, and they'll come up with this number eight. But they don't really know why. It's just a number that rattles around. And when you look at the human beings on the planet, as I travelled around, you go, well, how does that apply to people in the Northern Hemisphere or Southern Hemisphere? Or how does it apply to that to surgeons and nurses and pilots and also and parents with kids completely disrupting their sleep pattern? So I thought, well, what it basically is again, tap it in your browser, look at human sleep cycles, and you will see that up until the electric light was developed around the 1930s, that human beings never ever tried to sleep in one block nocturnally. They would be more synchronized with the rolling 24 hours because of their relationship with light, diminished light and dark. They would sleep in a polyphasic manner, which might be biphasic, twice a day, triphasic, 3 times a day, multiphasic, which could be 6 times a day, and crazy phasic. And you could apply those to how does a single-handed round-the-world sailor be at sea for 3 months and they can only sleep when these 10 pieces of criteria are in place to leave the deck and try to go into a sleep state. Even then, we'd only do it for 26 minutes or so because they have to go back and check. Now, how do we do that? How do we sometimes don't sleep at all because we're anxious or adrenaline or worry or just excited, and yet we still smash it the following day? So it's kind of, why is that? So you sort of think, well, the monophasic approach, which is get all of your 8 hours, sort of 8 hours is 30 odd percent of 24. So there's no sort of argument against human beings need to have 8 hours plus worth of recovery in a rolling 24-hour basis. But it doesn't have to be focused specifically on the fourth phase of the day, nocturnal, right? So when you start to think of it like that, you think, well, yeah, I am aware of siestas. Now, nobody's really going to sleep in that period, but what they do is do different things between 1 and 3. Right? So they work a little bit later or start a bit earlier. They're still in restaurants at 1 o'clock at night with their kids. And you go, wow, wow, wow. So it is a myth, because have you ever met anybody who gets 8 hours solid sleep with no awakenings, no disturbance, 365? Never mind 7 days. Nobody. All it is we're allocating the time, but nobody's actually sleeping fully through that period. Even people who fall asleep really quickly and then the alarm goes off sort of 8 hours later and they've got bed hair and everything, and they just went, well, I slept all the way through. But if you actually looked at it carefully, most of that was in light sleep. So they still feel unrefreshed. So it's kind of, I think, when you asked before about the question, I mean, everybody's got trackers, and now trackers track sleep. And you go, wow, suddenly that's doing that now, when we haven't even started the educational process. So you start thinking, well, wow, now I'm starting to look at actually what's happening. And whilst they're still guessing and still making a bit of a guess at what's happening, because it's not brainwave patterns, you still start thinking about, wow, deep sleep does not get revealed on my tracker from sort of 3 o'clock onwards. Why is that? I need to improve that. Nick, I want to get more deep sleep in the final hours before I go to sleep, not just in the early hours. Well, if you actually know that your brain will not go looking for deep sleep beyond 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in a cycles basis, then that's why. And that's why a lot of people wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, feel wide awake and can't get back to sleep and worry about it. So it's kind of, once you shift, using that lovely word, mindset to what it is and how it's revealed, you suddenly stop worrying about it. And it's a wonderful place to get to when you start to think of it like that. So it is a myth.